Ladies and fictional men, welcome back to my YouTube channel. And if you know, hi, I'm Haruka. Today's video is going to be how much I can read in 24 hours. The time is currently 52 minutes past 1. So let's just get on with it. Oh, the book I'm currently reading is The Temple House Vanishing by Rachel Donahue. And the way this challenge is going to work is I have a notepad where I'm just going to write down the title book, what page I started on, what page I finished on, and then the total pages I've read up to that book. So I started Temple House Vanishing in this video on page 60. Guess who just dropped a book and has now lost a page? Me. But for once I can easily find it because I know what page I started on. And my lunch is ready. Yay. Yay. And I'm gonna eat this and watch some YouTube and then read. That's my day. I think it's Louisa. Yep. Louisa's just imagined her art teacher naked. Legit. That little quote is, he pulled his jumper off and tied it around his shoulders as he spoke. His shirt raised up as he did so, and I noticed his back was lean and tanned. I wondered again what age he was, and imagined him for a second naked with Miss Clement, the French teacher. Page 64, I have a prediction. I think Victoria, which is another character, is having a illegal relationship with Mr. Lavelle, which is the art teacher. I have a second theory, and that is Victoria killed Louisa and Mr. Lavelle. Mr. Lavelle was having a illegal relationship with both Louisa and Victoria. No, Louise. Is her name Louise? Yeah, Louisa. He was having a legal relationship with both Louisa and Victoria, and there was an altercation, or Victoria got jealous and was like, dead, and killed them both. That's my theory. The woman was too stunned to speak. I zoned out, as I do when I read. I found out that Victoria and Mr. Lavelle were for once running off together because they're in love. So, my new theory is Mr. Lavelle and Victoria were to run off. Louisa does not want Victoria to. She goes off to wherever they're going. Something happens. Or Louisa and Mr. Lavelle end up running off. I'm on page 307 and I just found out what happened to Louisa. And I was right. Jealousy. Victoria was jealous and slapped Louisa, and then Louisa basically fell off a cliff to a ledge below, and then Victoria was like, I'm gonna kick Turtle on your body. So she did. I'm not sure how I feel about this book though. It's definitely 3 stars. I know that much. I finished the Temple House Vanishing. I ended up rating it 3 stars. My predictions were correct, and it did give me major. I've forgotten the name of the film, but it has Neve Campbell, and she plays a student who had a legal relationship with her teacher. But it just reminds me of that film. If I remember, I will put the film's poster or the name of the film up now. I read is The Boy with the Tiger's Heart by Linda Coggin. but I'm actually really excited to read this. The cover gives me Jungle Book vibes. But yeah. Also, I need to cook my tea, so I'm going to pause the timer while my tea is cooking. But if I choose to read, I will continue the timer, if that makes sense.
I'll wipe the tears off of your face, a little red from all the sun. No, I can't promise it'll be okay, but while you're here you can rest in my arms. You've gone through so much on your own. Your family broke when you were 10. You started drinking to keep up with all the change. Burnt your bridges, now you build them up again.
J names we don't like, but J, you're the exception. And Chaos, whatever your bloody name is, we don't like you. She is the baddest of bitches. Basically, my favourite guy out of the two, Jay gets shot. And then Nona turns around. So Jay gets shot by Bolvac. And then Nona turns around and says, what was it you said? An eye for an eye. So this is for bit, yeah. What was it you said? An eye for an eye. He looks up. She sees him in his greasy leather coat, a cool smile on his face, his cyber eye gleaming impolite. She takes aim, draws back her arm and lets the arrow fly from the bow. Before he has time to lift his gun, the arrow hits his eye. She sees it explode with a flash of light and Bolvac fall to the ground. Don't mess with Nona, and don't you dare hurt Jay. Also, I'm on page 215. This is how much I have left. This is honestly a really good book. But is it 5 stars though? Definitely 4.5 for sure. Book 2 is done. Do you know that's the second time I've hit myself in the face with a book for a YouTube video. Book 2 is done. Now I need to choose my next one. Yeah, 5 stars. Woo! 2 books in 24 hours. And I have 18 hours left. Yay. Let's ignore the fact that I basically look like a Simpson. It's 7 past 11. I have my lamp on. I'm on page 102 of Charlotte's Web. And I am hella tired. So I am going to sleep. And I legit look like I have black eyes. Like, as in black eyes. Like black-eyed children and not like punch in the face black-eyed. Anyway, I'm gonna go sleep. I will probably keep you updated and come on. And I do not like this book at all, and I'm really, really sad about it. Because when I was younger, I was obsessed with film Charlotte's Web. Which actually makes a lot of sense because my favourite animal now is a pig. Like, a huge obsession. Honestly, look at Wilbur. It's really cute. But yeah, anyway, I'm gonna go to sleep. For starters, let's ignore the bedhead. I haven't brushed my hair and I haven't long woken up. I've been scrolling on TikTok, but then I finally unpaused the timer because I'm going to read this for half an hour and then I need to get ready because I'm going out to Costa to read. And I also want a cake. Well, I just want something sweet, basically. But I do want a cake. So I'm going to take you guys along with me. Hopefully I'm going to finish that book by then. Just waiting for bus and my hair looks really brown today. Yay. No cake was bought. Tesco's book selection is terrible, or at least my Tesco is. And now I'm waiting for the bus so I can get back home, because I can't be bothered to walk. So I'm now at home. This is going to be my next read. I got this for my last birthday, and I'm so excited. My bookshelf looks really weird now, because there's a gap in the middle, which is where this normally is, because I like the front cover. I need to update my Notion. No, I would not. Go away. Nope. Book graveyard. Let's ignore that happened. Let's just do So I've had this book for over a year. So I just read like for this part. Just to like jog my memory, and let's do a reenactment. Ooh. Am I legit setting my dog's bed to read because I wanted to read in this corner? Yes, I am. And is my dog now begging for attention even though I want to read? Yes, he is. Would you like to be in my YouTube video? Would you like to be in my YouTube video? Say hello. My legs look really long. Yep. I was going to say where's your toy, but your toy is here. What's this? My dog has joined me. Well, it is his bed. Lol. No, my book. Yes, I took this off. This doesn't always happen, but it was annoying me. So I took it off, and am I using it as a bookmark? Yes. Yes, I am. Hi, buddy. Oh, that loud. Hi, buddy. You're so cute. This bitch is sugar. So, I've just met Captain Hook. Because there was a knockety-knock on Wendy's door. And then they answered it, and it's, I'm Detective James. And I was like, why do I recognise this name? And I was like, let me do some Googling. So I was like, okay, Google, what's Captain Hook's first name? Captain James Hook. I've met Captain Hook. And I've also met Peter Pan. I'm on page 42. I do like this book. I've actually heard a lot of mixed feelings. I've heard a couple of people say it's bad. And then, when I was growing up, I was obsessed with Peter Pan. Like, I had the biggest crush. I had the biggest crush on the 2003 Peter Pan when he's blonde. Not the Disney Peter Pan, but the 2003 Peter Pan. Yes. But oh my god, I just met Captain Hook. Well, I'm gonna carry on reading. I have one question. So I've obviously met Wendy because the book follows her parents, and Peter, and Captain Hook, or at least I think he's Captain Hook. He's called James. James is the first name of Captain Hook. Where are the Lost Boys? Where I think about. Obviously, I haven't met John and Michael, which is Wendy's little brothers, because they are missing. I don't think they're dead. Also, I wonder how Neverland's going to be done into this, because Wendy and her brothers went missing for 6 months when she was 13. The dog also disappeared, but the dog was found later on the day that they went missing. Wendy was found 6 months later, holding on to an acorn, which is so important. Not necessarily important in the Disney version, but important in the 2003 version, which is so good. Peter has just appeared. And then on the next page it says, "Don't even touch me, Wendy snarled, trying her best to be intimidating, even as terror gripped her. It seemed to do the trick, because Peter stood far back, looking downright shocked and even a little frightened. "You hit me," he spluttered, rubbing his jaw. I like this Wendy. Not Peter dissing Wendy for having it feel for dark. "Are you alright?" Peter asked. She could feel him just behind her shoulder. Wendy wrung her sweaty hands together and nodded. Yes, I'm fine. Just a little afraid of the dark." It was only half a lie. She was afraid of the woods, but especially afraid of them at night. Peter laughed. It came so easily to him. That's a strange thing to be oh my god, I can't read. That's a strange thing to be scared of. He grabbed the lantern from a hook on the wall and pressed it into her hand. "There," he said. Chin tilted proudly. "Problem solved." Wendy gripped the metal handle. "Right." Peter hopped through the doorway and leisurely strolled through the woods. Begrudgingly, Wendy followed. "Since when are you afraid of the dark anyway?" Peter asked, glancing back at her over his shoulder. Wendy almost stopped, wanted to pull back from the familiar way he kept talking to her. Peter continued, leading the way through the woods. His bare feet easily transferred rocks and tree roots. "I mean lions, quicksand, nasty taste of medicine. Those are all valid things to be afraid of," he said, leaping onto a fallen tree, his arms out at his sides as he walked along it. He seemed perfectly at home. "But the dark?" he asked. Peter jumped down and fell back into step next to Wendy. "Really?" Peter Pan is now called Barry, apparently. Basically, Wendy brought Peter into her house, and Mrs. Starling walked in and was like, "I recognise you. Do I know you?" No, Wendy was like, "No, this is Barry." I have nothing against the name Barry, but it's Peter Pan too. Barry. Wendy's like, "Well, this teenager has a lot of things she needs to talk to you about," she told Peter. "Let's go, Flower Prince," because Cassidy made him a little flower crown. And then Peter turned around and said, "Only if you promise to call me Prince," he said, helping Cassidy readjust her thumbs. "Peter, your Highness is also acceptable." "Peter!" Oh my god, this is didn't even know who that spoke. As you can tell, I really like this book. Did I just like squeal because Wendy attached her the acorn that she has to a necklace? Yes, I did. Did it remind me of the 2003 Peter Pan and that's the reason why I squealed? Yes, it did. So I have this much left. I'm on page 236. So Peter and Wendy have just discovered the shadow, but they couldn't defeat it. And Wendy didn't even make a move to defeat it. Okay, that makes it sound really terrible. I do not mean that. I think, so Mrs. Darling knows Peter because Mrs. Darling has been to Neverland and was a pretty good buccaneer and was really good with a sword, as said by Peter. So I think they're going to need Mrs. Darling's help to defeat the shadow. So excited. There are, in my copy at least, 374 pages and I have less than 100 pages left. Oh my god, I have less than... I'm so excited. But I also don't want this book to end because it's actually really, really, really good. There has been a bunch of times where I haven't cried, but I've been like, this close to crying. One bed trope, but I don't think they're gonna share. But Wendy just said, you can sleep on the bed if you want, she offered. Suddenly, I don't mind sleeping on the floor. Waving her off, Peter slid to the edge of the mattress. Wendy took 2 more steps away. No way, you sleep in your own bed, he told her. He went to the floor and sprawled out on the sleeping bag. That wouldn't be very gallant. That wouldn't be very gallant of me, he pointed out, arching his back and gripping at her as he stretched. Wendy plucked a pillow from her bed and tossed it at him. Since when are you gallant? Wendy asked. Peter caught it easily. Your words wound me, Wendy darling. God. I need to... Even though it said that, like, Wendy's 18, Peter's also 18 at this point because he's aging. But I keep on imagining them as what they look like in the live action. But, yeah. And I just love them so much. Basically, like, Peter and Wendy are talking about what they wanted, well, what Wendy wanted to be when, she grew up. And she was like, oh, what did you want to be when you grew up, Peter? And then he was like, oh, I was never meant to grow up. And then he was saying how he was free. And then she was like, oh, he says, in Neverland, I could do whatever I wanted. I was free. But were you, Peter? Wendy heard herself ask. He paused and then shook his head, not understanding. You could do whatever you wanted. Play whatever make-believe games you could come up with. But lost kids were always coming and going. You said so yourself, Wendy said. And it was always just make-believe. Didn't you ever want something? She tried to find the right words. Real? You never felt like you were missing something. Peter's celestial eyes locked on hers. Not until I met you. Not me about to cry. You're shaken, Wendy said. Peter's throat bubbled as he swallowed, giving a barely perceptible nod of his head. I thought you weren't afraid of anything, Wendy heard herself say. She was light-headed and breathless. I'm terrified, he said quietly. His starry eyes held hers, and she couldn't look away. She didn't want to. Of what? Wendy asked. Peter's words brushed against her lips. Losing you. Oh, he's gonna lose her at the end of Louisa. She's gonna get her brothers back. And then Peter's gonna lose Wendy. And then he's gonna get really, really sad. I'm getting sad thinking about it. Oh, she's gonna have to like choose between staying at Horgon, which is where the book is based, or going to Neverland. I would choose Peter. But I'm way older. I'm Wendy's age! I would choose Peter. So is family. I'll be like, yo, Peter, I'll come. Can I bring my nephews? Oh, not me crying. Not me getting emotional over Peter Pan. Can I stay with you, Peter whispered, ghosting over her lips. Wendy bawled the front of his shirt in her hands, pulling him to her. There was a moment of lips pressed to lips, a taste of honeysuckle, and an unbearable lightness that made her feel like she would float away if she didn't hold on to him. Oh shit. But then the window burst open, an exploding backdraft of darkness that tore them apart and threw Wendy to the ground. But they've just kissed! Shadow, why did you ruin this for them? I'm actually crying. I'm on page 324 and I found out what happened to John and Michael. Which is Wendy's brothers. Basically, there's a theory that Peter Pan, anyone who goes to Neverland is in a coma, like John, Michael and Wendy were all in a coma. And the Lost Boys are dead children. And Peter Pan is the person to guide them. And in this book, that's what he is. Wendy didn't remember, but John and Michael wanted. Hold on. Allow me to explain. The Shadow said, after all, I've been completely honest with you since we met, and pointed out with a lift of his eyebrows. Peter guides the souls of dead children to the afterlife when they've died in a particularly horrible way. The Shadow made an exaggerated cringe. He took them to Neverland. Yeah, it actually kind of makes a lot of sense because Wendy was found with a lot of blood. But they never found. They never found bodies. I'm properly crying. Oh my god. John and Michael were killed. They were shot by Mr. Davies, which is Wendy's next door neighbour. Mr. Davies has known this whole time. Mr. Davies was a really close friend of Wendy's dad. So, the air shifted, the tension easing. Oh, so Peter's alive. The tension easing with relieved sighs and slumping shoulders. Benjamin, however, still had the same bug-eyed look of astonishment on his face as he stared at Peter. Ben? Are you Peter Pan? He blurted out. Wendy froze. She looked at Peter. Who? He glanced around, pointing a finger at himself. Me? His head tipped back, and he let out a sharp laugh. Of course not. Slowly, he lifted off the ground, hovering in midair, hands on his hip, head cocked, and eyebrows raised. Everyone knows Ben... Oh, everyone knows. Sorry, I skipped the line. Everyone knows fairy tales aren't real. Oh my god! So I'm on page 356 and Wendy has just revealed. She remembered. She glanced at Detective James, the person I thought was Captain Hook. I remembered, she told him, when I saw the tree. Detective James caught a look at Detective Rowan. Immediately she called over two CSI agents and murmured an order. They headed for the clearing, but Detective Holmes stayed where she was. Wendy's words hung in the air for a moment. Everyone was quiet. Mr. Darling was rattled but not surprised. Maybe he already knew, and had just been waiting 5 years for someone to confirm it. He opened his eyes again. Mr. Darling turned to Detective James. His face tried to pinch into the angry expression Wendy had grown to know well. But his chin wobbled and his eyes glistened. What happened to them? Who did it? Was it the man who took the other kids, he demanded? His voice thick. It was Mr. Davies. All the eyes that had been glued to Wendy swung over to Mr. Davies. Wendy braced herself, expecting him to immediately deny it, to argue and push back. Maybe he would even start shouting about his innocence. Instead, Mr. Davies took on a sickly pallor. His eyes fell to the ground. He bent forward and buried his face in his hands. What? Wendy's father was the first to break the silence, his attention bouncing between Wendy and his friend. His face scrunched up, sharp lines of confusion digging into his brow. Are you sure? Detective James asked carefully, stony and serious. Detective Holmes silently slipped behind Mr. Davies. Wendy nodded, her fingers twisted into the hem of her shirt. How do you know that, Wendy? Her hand found the acorn tied around her neck. I remembered gunshots echoing through the snowy woods, her brothers crumpling to the ground, splotches of red and white snow, the glint of a rifle, Mr. Davies' signature red plaid. They were seared into her memory now, not soon to be forgotten, probably never. A new set of nightmares to relive over and over. Wendy wished Peter were by her side. She's telling the truth, Mr. Davies almost moaned, dropping his hands from his face, his eyebrows gathered in, his mouth twisted and miserable. It was me. His eyes darted nervously among Mr. Darling, Wendy, and Detective James. Wendy saw Detective James's hand go to his waist. Her father didn't move a muscle. Mr. Davies swallowed hard. I did it. It was an accident, he stammered. I was hunting out of season. I had been drinking. I thought they were deer. He spoke so fast, Wendy could barely keep up. Mr. Davies buried his hands in his hair. I panicked. I got a shovel from my truck and he let out a groan like a wounded animal. I wanted to confess, he said pleadingly to Mr. Darling. Wendy's father continued to stare. Deep red blotches bloomed on his cheeks, but I had my 2 little boys at home and my wife. Wendy felt no sympathy for Mr. Davies. Frantically, he turned to Wendy and took a step forward, his hands clasped together. I'm sorry, Wendy. Wendy recoiled. Mr. Darling stepped out. Oh my God. Mr. Darling snapped out of his daze. Don't you dare come anywhere near my daughter. Obviously, John and Mike were dead, so technically they're not. Well, they are found, but they're not. Wendy has just said, oh, it's my fault, and her parents were like, no. And then her mum was like, you found them, Wendy. Her mum murmured it against the top of her head. Oh, I lost my page. They're safe. Page 366. Wendy's just gone to her old room, which she shared with her brothers. She sat on, like, the iconic windowsill. Peter's there. They're talking. She's like, oh, you could stay. He's like, oh, you could come with me. And then she was like, I'll see my brothers again. And he was like, yes. And then she was like, no, in my luck, we would start this all over again. And he was like, yeah. And then she said, oh, you could grow up with me here. And then he was like, I can't. I need to go back and take care of lost kids. I want to, he corrected himself, to look after them. Wendy nodded. Growing up sounds awful anyway, Peter said casually with a dismissive wave of his hand. He looked over the backyard towards the woods. His eyes shone especially bright and the tip of his nose turned pink. Though his head tipped and he looked at Wendy from the corner of his eye. Maybe not so awful if it were with you. It's official. I've just finished Lost in Neverwoods by Aidan Thomas. I fucking loved it. 5 stars. It made me cry a bunch of times. We are back in my little corner. So I obviously finished Lost in Neverwoods. It was honestly really good, and now I want to write a Peter Pan retelling, which I probably will, because I thought of an idea ages ago. I just need to flush it out. I've also picked my next read. I know I said I want a happy book, but I'm also trying to pick short books. So I decided I'm going to read Lord of Flies by William Golding. It's for next day. My timer has gone off, which means I've now officially read for 24 hours. I'm on page 114 of Lord of Flies. So I'm basically like halfway. So it started with the Temple House vanishing. I started on page 60 because I was already reading the book. Finished it on 327. Our total with our first book is 267. And then I read The Boy with the Tiger's Heart. I started on page 3. I finished 229, which brought my total to 496. And then I read Charlotte's Web, which I started on page 1, and I finished on page 160. 170, which brought our total to 666. And then I read Lost in Neverwoods, started on page 1, finished 374, which brought our total to 1040. And then, lastly, I read Lord of the Flies, and I started on page 1, and I finished on page 114, which brings our final total to 1,154 pages. So I'm pretty happy with that number. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to comment down below what videos you want me to do, who you want me to do a collab with, and questions, and on how I do a Q&A video. Also, give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and press the subscribe button and the notification bell, so then you get a notification every single time I upload a brand new video. And I shall see you in my next one.